Hello, today we will be talking about the Black Power movement, and our group consists of Todd Arias Acevedo, Vanessa Lua, Bithia Marin, Gianni Oquendo, and Kate Sines. The Black Power movement lasted from 1954 to 1975, and one of the main leaders and contributors to the movement was Stokely Carmichael. Stokely Carmichael was first born June 29 of 1941 and passed November 15 of 1998. One of his many contributions was that he was the progenitor of the Black Power slogan, and where he first said it during a civil rights march in Greenswood, Mississippi on June 16th of 1966. Carmichael was an important civil rights activist who argued that institutional racism has distorted the shape and character of American society. Carmichael became the chairman of the SNCC Student of Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he also provided the name and militancy for the Black Panther Party. He went from going college to touring to many other countries outside of the United States, ultimately bringing the Black Power movement to a global scale.
Malcolm X was one of the leaders that really helped influence the Black Power movement, and he was viewed as the leader of radical movement for African American liberation. And he also really influenced many organizations that represented Black power impulses. And one of these groups was called the Group on Advanced Leadership, also known as GOAL. And this group was formed by local militants such as Reverend Albert Cleage, James and Grace Lee Boggs, and Richard and Milton Henry. And from the years 1954 until his death in 1965, he was actually assassinated. But from this time period, Malcolm X led a movement that would influence a new leader who would turn this new era the Black Power movement during the classical periods of 1966 through 1975. So the Black Power movement was a civil rights movement from 1954 to 1975 that rooted from the freedom struggles during the Great Depression and the World War II era. It was created by Black Power activists to test American democracy and their will to grant citizenship to the Black community. Yet many viewed it as a movement made up of armed urban militants that were more focused on war and revenge than a political action. But in New York, Baltimore, New Orleans, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Oakland and Los Angeles are some places in which urban militants advocated for the basic needs such as for basic human needs such as better housing, better public schools, employment, welfare benefits, and an end to police brutality. This was done through bus boycotts, sit-ins, and political assassinations as well. This movement has been deemed the most important in social and political development of the post-war era due to its legal and legislative victories that transformed American democracy.
Moving on to the earlier parts of the history of the Black Power movement, to start off, the movement grew out of the civil rights movement. Many people and scholars believe that the movement was a more violent, evil twin to the civil rights movement. This was due to the more acts of violence during rebellions, during protest, and even more white backlash. Many leaders and activists of the movement viewed the nonviolent protest as ineffective and old, and they sought to reach further tactics that the civil rights movement used during that time. This caused the creation of several groups, such as the Black Panther Group and the SNCC, which is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and even beyond those groups, the Nation of Islam and the Congress of African people um, sought their followers to do more than just fight in the nonviolent way. And due to their thinking and their idea to press the issue, this caused a lot of rebellions. During the beginning of the era, there were over 300 rebellions that took place in over 250 cities, and most of these cities were in the South. And then what caused even more friction was that after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, there was 200 more rebellions that occurred.
Continuing with the history of the Black Power movement, leaders fought for equality through one institutions. These were usually public schools, colleges, and universities. Many of those who were involved in the movement were young Black scholars. This led to the creation of Black-owned colleges and universities. Meanwhile, others organized Black-led institutions to unite African Americans and teach them about political power and cultural pride. This led to the creation of Black studies programs in universities and colleges. Next followed ministers preaching Black theology. Black theology was created by James Cone, who sought to use context from Christianity to teach liberation, whether it be economical, political, or social. Soon followed the creation of the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers were created in Oakland, California in 1966 by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. The organization first sought to bring the end to police brutality in Black neighborhoods, but soon followed to becoming a revolutionary party.
What was Black Power for the supporters and critics of the movement? I want to point out that it wasn't a formal organization, but it was a belief, which opened the possibilities for different perspectives. For the supporters of the movement, they had different opinions of what it meant, but in general, Black Power was Black pride. For years, they have internalized inferiority, and this movement reclaimed back the honor of Black people. And it promoted the idea that Black is beautiful. Black Power was Black liberation, in which they could have self-determination, political and economic power. For them, Black Power also was self-defense to racial oppression and police brutality. It was a way of policing the police, and they were against the non-violent movement. For the critics of the movement, the Black Power was Black radicalism because they focused on racial, political, economic, and cultural oppression, and they had controversial strategies. Some even said that they gained notoriety not for their political analysis, but for their arms stance. The Black Power movement was also criticized for the lack of Black women activist representation. Despite the high number of biographies of Black Panther Party, there is no full-length historical study of Black Panther women, and the few Black women activists were often branded as troublemakers. The movement was also perceived as sexist because Black women were not represented in the demands of the movement. Workers, especially organized industrial workers, were assumed to be male, and union representation was seen as a men's job. In this last page, we have all the articles that we use as reference for this presentation. Thank you.